live. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the 13th episode of Women of Color and Confidence. My name is Amber Rose. I'm going to be your host, and today I am joined by Kloii Hummingbird. We are going to be talking about a topic that I've heard raised many times in my conversation with Black women over the last year, and that is stopping the bombarding of your racist family stories to your Black friends, especially to Black women. I didn't realize that this was something that was happening until really began to realize that this is now a topic. Racial issues, racial tensions are things that people are talking about more openly, especially within their families. And people are beginning to see, wow, I didn't realize that what people in my family thought this way. And now I'm turning to people in my life to try and get some common ground, some commiseration, right? It's really beginning to strain on us as Black women. And today we are going to talk about it. One of the reasons that I invited Kloii on is because Kloii inspires me every day with her posts, her words, her inspiration, her motivation. And it's not always this soft, huggy, kissy kind of information. It's really in your face. Let me tell you the truth. Let me tell you about your impact on the lives of Black people. So I figured she was the perfect person to come on and have chat with me about this. So Kloii, thank you so much for being here with me today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah. I want to throw it back
Thank you
to
for that
you and
intro.
allow you to introduce yourself to the listeners.
Well, hello, listeners. My name is Kloii Hummingbird. I am an actor, dancer, and writer, anti-racist advocate, intersectional feminist. I have a blog called Love as Social Action. You can find it on KloiHummingbird.com, and on Instagram as the Hummingbird Yogini.
I love it. I posted one of your posts today because I was just so touched and so moved.
I saw that.
Yes, yeah, and yes, please follow her. She's got some great content to share. Definitely some for me, even me personally, I every time I read something that you post, I think about it so much. I like chew on it a little bit. I'm just like, ooh, like perspectives, like they're coming at me, and I enjoy it too, even in the midst of my work. So, I'm actually curious, like, how did you feel when I brought this topic to you? Is it something that you've been feeling personally in your life or experiencing with other Black women, Black people around you?
It's interesting. The other day, on Sunday, I hosted a talk, and one of the points of and the talk was around interracial friendships, and the point of discussion came up with someone saying, I think was piggybacking off of something else when we're like, we don't want to teach white people about what's happening. White people need to just kind of figure it out, get with it. And he made a point where, like, well, where you don't want to teach, like, there apparently white supremacists are ready and eager to teach and throw out a bunch of what they think are factual evidence to prove that their case of, I don't know, superiority or whatever. And he says, you not wanting to teach while this other teaching is going on. If it's like sort of a battle, you would think the other side would want to teach. And I was like, well-meaning straight white man, I'm assuming straight, cis appearing white man.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, well, yes, it's easy. It's easy for white supremacists to want to teach and educate. There's no trauma involved when a person of color, specifically a Black person, has to educate the oppressor on all the various ways in which you're oppressing me, and have to hold space while you process your white guilt and like step into awareness. Like, that's me unloading all my baggage, all my trauma, all my pain in ways that I may not even know how to articulate. And it's not fair to me, because you can figure it out in a multitude of ways that does not come from like me holding the oppressed group holding space for the oppressor. Like, what world is that normal? So in one way I understood his point, and the other way I'm like, I don't have the emotional capacity all the time. I don't speak for all people of color or all Black people, but for me as a Black woman, like, I can't handle it all the time, because it's like a psychic hit. It's like each time I'm like engaged in that, like trying to educate you, and the defensiveness, right? Like that comes like, and each feeling of resistance that I feel from the white person not understanding what I'm putting down, it's like a psychic hit that's draining. It's like, how are you not understanding my humanity? How are you questioning my humanity right now? Like, why is this even a conversation? You know, like relieve survivors. And I think that applies in, you know, trauma in many ways. So
one thing that you hit on that I think is true that I've been feeling is, you know, I've spent most of my life dealing with my like racial interactions in the dark, and on top of that, I was always taught to do things, you know, from my parents, my uncles, my family. I was raised by a white family, that to do things in order to not like poke white people or agitate white people or make them nervous or afraid or scared, all these things, right? And
assimilation.
And then
it's because we have to. It's literally for our safety.
Right, literally
making white people feel comfortable is literally for our safety, so we can keep our jobs, so we can keep our homes, so we can keep food on the table, so we cannot die. Like, it's literally it's assimilation. I cut you off. I'm sorry
about that. It was a lot about not messing with other white kids, because then it was like they could say anything and get you kicked out of school kind of thing, you know? So it was like all of these things where I was like, man, I'm constantly hyper focused, hyper aware, changing my actions, doing all these things. And that was something that I had to deal with on my own. Like, I couldn't go to my white friends and be like, can you believe what my mom and my uncle has just told me about how I should be behaving right now? And all of that stuff I had to process through all of my childhood, my young adulthood, into like college and adult years. And now I'm finding that like white people want us to hold space for them while they're experiencing their like racist things in their life. And I'm like,
it's because they're so, it's like, I think it also comes from a place of like, I'm sorry. Like, and they want you to be there. Well, it's like, look at how sorry I am, right? I'm suffering right now. This is not, and not to say, I mean, I'm sure maybe that, not to say it's all disingenuous. I'm sure some of it is genuine, right? Like, if I always say, if I put myself in a white person's shoes and I've just been blinded forever, and then I came into the light automatically, like the allegory of the cave by Plato, and was like, oh, this is how the world really is. Like, I would have some, like, I would feel guilty. Like, oh my God, I've been treating Black people like shit, and everybody, and I've just been so complacent. So I get it. I lost my train of thought.
Do you think that bringing those stories to us is about guilt, though? Because I feel like it's more like like commiserate with me. Like, I like, oh, now I get what you're talking about. Let's be mad about it or upset about it together. And I'm kind of just like, your stories with your family like aren't shit compared to like what we've been dealing with. But
you know, and that's a big reason. Like, I'm not even down with white people like that anymore. And that sounds like maybe some ears, so like such a radical thing to say, or even like a prejudice thing to say. But it's literally coming from a defense mechanism, realizing where even some of the white people that I viewed as friends, like seeing it from my own people in my life, my white counterparts, is really how I dived into realizing that there is a spectrum to racism. There's not just like the tiki torch races. There's the races who, like, you know, just think maybe consciously or unconsciously, because they've been indoctrinated into a society to think that they are better, that they are the standard, and everything else is other, or everything else is less than, or they haven't thought about it. So if you haven't made it conscious, it's unconscious to thinking about what Black people go through and their own privilege. And them not realizing that is like saying they don't see my color, is like saying they don't see all the things that are actually happening. And I'm at this point, like, white people need to like come. If I'm with a white person in a space and I have to bring up race first, I already know that they not on that spectrum of racism, of abolitionists and allyship. Like, I already know, because a white person that's on that path, it's like it's so a part of their like consciousness, their lifestyle, that is just like, all right, I'm with the Black person, right? I gotta let them know that I come correct and that I'm gonna stand up for them if some shit goes down right now, even if it's a stranger. You know, it's
Is
just
that
like,
something that you like people to like straight up tell you, or is it something more that you appreciate through action?
um yeah, both, absolutely, of course, both. But I'm saying for my personal life, like,
Mm-hmm.
I am not in a place where I'm allowing white people into my space
Mm-hmm.
without knowing upfront where their integrity lies, where their
Mm-hmm.
literally where their integrity lies.
Yeah.
Like, I need to know that you are an anti-racist white person, not that you're just not racist. Like, what you saying you're not racist, what you doing to to not be racist? You
Right.
know, what you do about that? You got to do something to not be that way. You know what I mean?
Right.
You like, anti-racist, to be an anti-racist is to take action. And that's the only white people I'm fucking with. You
Yeah.
know?
I've definitely felt that this year too. And I haven't really gotten to the point, I've gotten to that point where I'm actually like just still cleaning house. Like I'm not adding any new people, but I've
Yeah.
definitely, even on my social media, like the people that I
Same.
follow on Instagram and the people that I have in my feed, I'm like, I'm just so sick of seeing all of like straight up whiteness in my face all the time. But
I
two,
know, I
and
just followed a bunch of Black people on Instagram.
me too. I've been
Change
scrolling
my
through. I'm like,
algorithm.
I love this.
Like, I don't need all these white yogis. Like, where's my
Oh,
Indian yogis?
the
Like,
yoga
let me follow
community
some
is
brown
such a
people.
tough one.
You know?
Oh, the yoga community is such a tough one, and I get that too, especially because I came from San Diego, and it's like literally all white yogis. Same in Denver, like it's all white yogis, you know.
Mhm.
But I've literally like on the other side of that been like tired of seeing fake allyship or like fake support, and I'm just like,
Yeah.
I'm so tired of seeing all these white people saying things but not really like saying anything or doing anything. And then on top of that, it's just like I'm ready to see more like powerful Black images, you know, like like that whole, I don't want to call it a show, but everything that happened in June where it was like only buying from Black businesses, only supporting Black like people, and I'm like, that's really great, but like you can't sustain something like that. You can't only buy from Black business every time you want to buy something, you know, like, and I don't need to hear you fucking announce it every time you do, you know, like it was just like this flag that got flown, and then
Mhm.
it was like, okay, now what, you know?
And that's what I mean. Like, you know, in the talk about the other day about interracial relations, like, this idea of like performative allyship, right? Like, look at the really good thing I did for Black people. Do you see, everybody? I'm so awesome. I did it. I did it. I love Black people. See, and that's like, that's helping you in your like white identity. Like, look at me in all my glory. Versus, what are you actually doing for, you know, Black people? It's all, everything's intention, right? Like, are you making that post because you really want to like be like, oh my God, this product was really dope and it was really from a Black owned business, and hey, you guys check this out because I think you would like it too? Or is it coming from that performative place of like, I'm so cool, I like Black people? Like, you know?
Isn't it great? I'm like really inclusive.
Well, yeah, yeah, and yeah, there's it's a fine line, you
Yeah,
know. And I think, yeah, I think it's a spectrum to all this, for sure.
yeah. I have been noticing with the people that I've talked to about, you know, their community, their white friends or whatever, coming to them with their stories, is like that mostly what they feel like is these white people want a sense of validation that they are doing the right thing
Mhm.
by being upset with a family member, or being upset that like they now think that, or you know, being so horrified that my mother would say such a thing or do such a thing, and that bringing it to their Black friends is like some kind of validation
That
to
is such a good word,
their,
validation. That is
yeah.
the perfect word for that. What is that? Like, I feel that from, I knew this one white guy before, and he, you know, and he was all like, hey, you know, hey, there's a Black guy. Maybe I'll be friends with him because he didn't have any like people of color friends. And then he kind of like, I'm like, why are you telling me that you're thinking about me. Like he wanted cool points from me. Like, look, I'm thinking about it. Like I'm applying, you know, and when I feel like when people of color step into the anti-racist journey, there's not the same validation needed from each other. We're like, I just read the books and I listened and then, gained the knowledge and then did little actions and protested and volunteered and signed and things. And, I did, and it was just, then I found my voice and I spoke up. Yeah. And I, with this needing validation from others along the way. Yeah. And yeah, it's interesting.
It's really interesting. It's that they want validation.
And I think it's the guilt, and like I said, hey, I feel guilty too. Yeah. I was as fucked up as white people and all that stuff.
Okay.
Am I allowed to curse? Is this a classy show?
No, I curse all the time.
Okay. Okay.
I mean, I have my flower on, but
I love that flower. It's so cute.
Yeah, I think that it's wanting validation, but at the end of the day, I also think that it's a big avoidance to having the hard conversations with someone that you don't want to have conversations with, right? It's almost like a girlfriend that always goes to her girlfriend to like bitch and complain about something, and then their girlfriends are always like, that sucks, you're right, fuck that guy, blah, 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 blah. And it's like, okay, but like, what if you're wrong? Like, what if you actually were the shitty person in this argument or this situation? Or what if, but they always go to that one person that validates exactly what they need to hear, that they're in the right, mm-hmm. They're doing that, instead of like taking accountability for their own actions or like having a hard conversation with someone else, right? And I feel like that's the same thing that happens is like, they bring their racist family stories to Black people. They try and get some validation. And then they go, well, at least I'm in the right. At least I'm not racist. And it really happens to bring this avoidance of like the conversation that they should be having with the white people in their life that don't get it.
It's this interesting phenomenon of whiteness that feels it can other itself from other white people. And I think maybe because they've always felt that they have had that privilege to be an individual, not lumped with other white people, because Black people have always been like those Black people and those Muslims and those Mexicans. It's always been like those everything else. And white people have, they've had the luxury to be just me. And if that white person robbed a bank, that's not any reflection upon me. Like they don't have to think about the mindset of what the people in their population, why would they would do something like that. And I think it comes from that, like, of that othering, that privilege of being like those crazy, and exactly what you said. It makes you not responsible. That the individual who's like, it's not me, that allows you to not dig any deeper because you're not racist, so you don't have to have any more introspection, Right. And or that's
even to go incorrect. Back to your people, I feel like I had so many people reach out to me when I started protesting a lot and I was live streaming, and they were just like, what can I do for you? How can I help you? How can I support the cause? And I'm like, talk to the fucking people in your life and mm-hmm. stop like asking me what you can do. Like, this starts at home. I mentioned to you earlier that I was like, I'm kind of sick and tired of hearing like, I'm going to continue to educate myself. I'm going to continue to educate myself. And I'm like, okay, well, at some point when you are real tough conversations you have to have with your parents, your aunts, your uncles, your cousins, your grandparents. Like, this isn't just about you anymore, just in the same way that like, it was never just about me when I was experiencing racism. It was about me and my brother and then the other kids in our class. And, it's like, I think about this all the time. When I was in high school, I went to a swim meet. And on the swim team, it was me and one other Black guy, and we went to Santee. And for those of you that don't know about Santee in California, they call it clan tea because there's a lot of racism in Santee. And they literally had to pull me and the other Black swimmer aside, and they were like, when we get on campus, the two of you are not allowed to go anywhere by yourself. Like, you cannot go anywhere together. You always have to have someone else on the team go with you. If you got to go to the bathroom, if you got to change, if you got to take a phone call, make a text that's not in the pool, you got to take a buddy with you. And I was like, what kind of fucking conversation is this to be having as a high school?
With a child, yes.
Yeah.
Right.
And I'm like,
crazy.
Okay, so this is something that I had to learn in my community, that my fellow teammate had to learn in my community, that we had to like get permission from our parents to actually even go to this meet because it was dangerous for us.
Mm-hmm.
And yet,
And
like,
you got there and you was like, bow down to my greatness, whiteys. What? Yes, I'm here. Take up the space. Yes.
I wish I could have been like that. Back in high school, I was like,
did you win?
Like, on the bleachers. I wasn't the fastest swimmer. So, I mean, I did well in my heats, but like our team won. We had some really good swimmers, but it was, and then on top of that, I'm like, okay, so now I have to go swim and compete with this in my head that like, I can't go anywhere because my safety's in danger. And I'm like, no, white swimmers have to deal with this shit out here. You know what I mean?
was just saying to my therapist recently, like she's just really laughing at me because I'm like upset, yelling. I'm like, I'm pissed off that I even have to process racism and trauma. Like the fact that like the added layer of just like stress that like Black people have to navigate in the world is just like, you know, and I've had some white people say, how do you do it? I'm like, you do it because you have to.
You do it because you have to.
You just figure it out or adapt or die, right? Or
and I think that you bring up a good point is that like we are constantly processing racist things. Yes. No matter where we go, no matter who we're talking to. Like I think about it when I'm crossing the street. Like I've almost been run off the road multiple times. And when I think about crossing the street, if I'm like at a place that's like corner to corner, but no like light, I'm like, what are the chances that this person will actually stop? And like, I think about that and I'm like, do white people think about that? Or do they just go, I have the right of way, so I'm going into the street. But I'm like, I don't know who's behind that wheel. And it could be the meanest, whitest. And they're just like, oh, Black person. Oops, I accidentally ran you over. And like, consequences, maybe not. Like I think about this all the time.
You know, I'm an actress and dancer, and my agency, from what I saw in there anyway, all white people in my talent agency. And I think about that, you know, consequences or side effects of being an outspoken Black woman is, you know, I could lose out on some opportunities. Rather, that's a conscious bias from, you know, my agent and the people in the agency, or an unconscious bias. And that's the thing about unconscious bias. You just don't know. They could favor, you know, someone else and be like, oh, you know, there's some other curly haired Black girls on our roster. Let's get some of these in, you know, and again, that's the thing about unconscious bias. You don't know, but that's the thing as a Black person you have to think about, like, oh shoot, I could lose opportunities, I can lose money, it'll take me longer to get where I want to go. I'm gonna get there because you know, I'm so talented, but it'll take longer, and something I have to think about that. And like, it's like, do I shut up? Or do I just keep being me, keep doing me, and keep it hustling? You know what I mean? So, and I'm gonna keep it hustling.
Yeah, me too. I've gotten to that point too. I always get really nervous about saying things. I mean, even living in my place right now, I've had an issue with a neighbor that's been like super loud, and I've been like worried about taking it to my landlord because I don't want to become like the complaining Black neighbor. And I'm like, I pay rent here too, and I should be able to sleep at night without having to, like, even with earbuds, I hear earplugs, I hear him every night. And I'm just like, I'm so sick of it. But I also don't want to be like that annoying Black complaining tenant because I'm worried that they'll be like, well, I'd rather just.
White women don't have to think about that. They're just like, they're not thinking about being the annoying Black tenant. They're like, I just deserve what I deserve. No, but. I mean, maybe they have their own individual insecurity that they feel like, oh, I feel small, I can't. But everybody has that too. So it's like, it's annoying and it's not fair and it pisses me off and it's frustrating that Black people have to, process all these things and be hyper vigilant. And it's no wonder we have the highest rates of stress related diseases of any other race. I wonder why we're so stressed.
Right? And I think that this leads back to like the point of this whole show, which is that they feel comfortable enough to unload their racist stories onto us without even a second thought into the fact that like this is a part of our societal makeup every day, right? Like, and I think it's one thing if you like ask permission, or if you say like, like, is this okay if we talk about it? But the conversations I've had is just like, I also think that because we're Black women, we're expected to like, oh, oh, child, like, come here, like, let me hug you, like, it's okay, and like try to comfort them in some way. But it's like, we also don't get a say. And if we're allowed to do that, if we have the space to do that, it's like constantly bringing at us. It's like
And it's like nobody's doing that for
from
Black women.
nobody's doing it for
You
us.
know, I try to always find the balance between being compassionate and holding that space, and then coming with the realness of the reality of the situation and power dynamics. It's just, it's a real, like, it's like, actually, you should be holding space for me right now. I am the one traumatized. I am the one oppressed. I am the one seeing Black bodies die in the street. So why are you crying? That pisses me off to no end. And I never said that out loud before. It pisses me off that, like, why are you crying?
Why are you crying to me?
Why? And this is, not pointing out any one conversation.
Like, I just honestly feel, I'm like,
and going back to what you were saying about, oh, I didn't hear you.
I like when they come crying to me, I want to say, like, turn it back around and go cry to those people who are making you feel this way.
Yeah.
Because I already feel this way, and I don't want to feel this way for me and you too.
I made an Instagram post once, and it was like, I was saying something about why, when my white friends call me when another Black person is killed by the police, an unarmed Black person is killed by the police. And I'm like, why don't you call your white friends whenever a Black person is killed by the police to see what they think and to see how they feel? And y'all can learn from each other and know who's really on the, like, far, right side of the tiki torch racist. Like, see who's on the spectrum, talk to each other. Why are you talking to me? Yeah. So
that's actually the post that I posted today. It really, like, I actually think about that post every time I see another murder. I'm always like, I hope the white people are talking to each other, because here's another one. And like, but
instead they shrink up and they get silenced because they're, and honestly, I keep saying to have a Black friend for a white person, I'm calling you to evolve. It's like, you cannot no longer be my friend and be the same person that you were before you met me. It's just impossible. Mm-hmm. I mean, you can go ahead and just be in the psychosis that is racism, but if you want to live in reality, I call you to evolve, and not everybody is ready for that evolution. So that's when that shrinking happens, and they don't want to confront all the things. It's a lot. It's like calling into your entire existence, your entire worldview, everybody around you, how you grew up. Like, racism is literally ingrained into everything. You have to, like, think about the images that you saw on TV, the things that you read, and then people, white people go back. I imagine, I don't know what they think, and they go back and watch the shows and read the books that they did before, and they're like, oh my God, like, I thought that shit was funny, but how did I agree? Yeah. And on one end, I have compassion because, like, they're indoctrinated into a racist world, right? A white supremacist world. But on the other end, you need to grow up and get with it. You got to get with it. You got to learn. So come on. We ain't waiting for you. Come on.
It's like, you're old enough to know better now. And once you know better, you need to start doing better. And when you're not doing better, we see you, like, we can see you doing nothing. And like, you're like, that whole coming to me to validate whatever racist experiences you're having with your family or your friends, that doesn't, or like asking me how I'm doing after there's another murder, like whatever, like, that doesn't really do anything for me. Except tell me that, like, you're not really wanting to do the tougher stuff, right? Like there's the tougher stuff that needs to be done. And, I read, So You Want to Talk About Race with my book club a couple months ago. And there's a whole chapter in the back of that book of all the different ways that you can begin dismantling white supremacy and racism in society. And it has to do with like, if you have kids, going to your kids' school and saying like how are these kids doing in school? Like, are they getting taken care of? Are they being bullied? Like, what's going on? And like actually being aware of things
And
on
if
a
I hear another white person say to me, "Oh, I don't talk about race on like my Instagram because that's just for work." I'm like, if racism is ingrained into everything, there's a way you can ingrain anti-racist work into whatever you're doing. Like I had this one girl, this one woman, Susan, who we're no longer on Facebook friends with. Fortunately, that we're not, because we don't see life the same, and unfortunately, because losing people sometimes it's hard to it's hard to lose people. But she said that her account is mostly fitness, and she was like, yeah, I don't really talk about politics or anything. And I'm like, I was like, I don't really know how like George Floyd is political. He saying anything about somebody who was shot in excuse me, not shot. Sorry, there's so many black people shot. I lose track.
Yeah.
We know what happened with him, or to him. I'm like, so to say nothing for like the whole year of 2020, pretty much when it was just going down with the how the world has treated black people in the black community, like she says nothing. I'm like, you can highlight, if you're a fitness account, you can fitness and nutrition. I'm like, you can say how black people do have like the highest rates of stress, and how maybe fitness can help with that. And or you can highlight some people on her account that are black people, like, oh, look at this person lost this much amount of weight, or like highlight some protein shakes that she like uses in recipes. So maybe do somebody's, I'm sure some black people got some protein shake. Right. Like there's so many things that you can do. It's like, it's not that hard. Right. Like, there are so many things that you can do and highlight, and it's just not an excuse anymore. I was talking to this cute guy, Kyle, the other day, and he says it on his other platforms, but he don't put it on his Instagram. And he got a lot of followers. I'm like, well, hey, I'm only on your Instagram, so maybe other people ain't seeing it on the TikTok. You know what I mean? Like maybe you need to say it over here. Are you making your money more over here? Is that why? And it's also, it's like white people are, what are you sacrificing? Yeah. You're afraid to sacrifice, and when we were talking about sacrifice earlier, like, shit, I am scared of being this outspoken and this real, and because the world is so an illusion that most people aren't real, and people wanting to stay in that realness, that disillusionment, my realness seems like a threat to their entire lifestyle. Exactly. And so I don't want to work with those directors, producers anyway. Right. But I'm sure most of them are running the Los Angeles entertainment industry. Yeah. And they're the ones probably shipping off, the funds for independent filmmakers. So it's but I choose to not assimilate, because in terms of sacrifice, I'm like, I'm a black woman. It is what it is anyway. Yeah. Like, if I shut up, are black people gonna stop dying? Right. Like, what is my shutting up helping? Like, I got a day job. I'm writing my film. Things are going. Things are happening. If I'm not gonna be with them, I'm gonna do it over here where I'm wanted. So it's really a shift in mindset in that way. I'm sure I went on a tangent there.
That's a good one. I've kind of been in that boat too, where I've been really noticing. I took a big notice all of last year, like, because I feel like that it was a big like sociology challenge last year between BLM and the pandemic and everything. And I just started watching for people who were pretending like neither one was happening. Just gonna pretend like it's not happening. I'm just gonna keep going on with my life. And I was like, that is such a fucking privilege that you get to ignore like systematic racism, murders in the street, these like very racist groups out here with freaking torches and their own marches, and our president like Nazis. Like you can't ignore that shit and just keep going on with your life and your business, because like who are you talking to that doesn't recognize that that's what you're fucking doing, right? Like you're just creating more groups of people who decide to turn a blind eye when things are really bad in this country. And I just started deleting people. And then when people are like, why'd you delete me? And I was like, why aren't you talking about BLM? Why aren't you wearing a mask? Why are you still going on? And I was just like, that's why I don't want to.
I cannot believe, not to steer the conversation away, but I literally cannot believe how many people are not wearing masks. For a moment, I was like, "Where's my mask?" Sitting in my bedroom alone. I'm like, "Where's my mask?"
I'm like two masks on when I go out, one for me and apparently one for fucking you.
It's awful. It's so frustrating.
It
like,
is. Well, I want to like end this chat. Of course, Women in Color and Confidence is all about like confidence, building confidence, having confidence. These types of boundary, we you and I have been talking about a lot today, is boundary building with people in our lives, creating the boundary of like not letting people in if they're not on our side, they're not fighting for our justice, our freedom, eradicating white supremacy. So I want to ask you, how did you formulate your self-confidence so that you could get to a point where you say, I don't want that in my life. I don't want to work with these kinds of people, or even straight up calling people out, you know, in your industry, saying like, hey, I noticed that you have this whole Instagram and not one single thing about Black Lives Matter, or, you know, the social injustices. Where does your confidence come from? How did you create it? And how do you bring it forth when you have these really tough conversations?
I have been on a conscious journey, goodness, since 2011, to find out who I am, to like literally conscious journey of exploring my boundaries in all the ways. Like I didn't take a few years off of life, but essentially just like me and my van and on the road, and just, you know, who am I when I'm alone? Who am I in general? And yoga. I currently, it sounds weird to call myself a retired yoga teacher, because I recently, with like a month and a half, decided to step it out, and I'm actually, my day job is I'm in the corporate world, and no longer teaching privately, but yoga is so still all up in my life. And there's no words for for free a yoga practice, for a meditation practice, for like learning how to still my mind, and the principles that come into that. Like, you know, nothing is permanent, everything is ever changing, and change is life. You know, those principles and stillness, and just speak truth, because, you know, what will be will be.
Yeah.
And gosh, yeah, I cannot stress yoga enough. Also, I've worked for 3 summers in a row with Contral Tiempo Urban Latin Dance Theater Company.
Mm-hmm.
It's a dance theater company here in Los Angeles, and they're a touring dance company. They do amazing work in North and South America. And I perform with them. I've trained with them. They also, during their summer trainings, have art as social action sort of workshops where we sit and we discuss these uncomfortable principles, anti-racism work. So it's interesting. I always find how vocal I am everywhere else. When I'm in those trainings, I am just like, I am a student. I am the sponge. I spend most of my time listening. And shout out to Ana Maria Alvarez, whoever's listening, Contra Tiempo on Instagram, Contra Tiempo Urban Latin Dance Theater Company. The longest name in history, but they're amazing in all the ways. Their intention is to do community-based art that drives like the political evolution forward. And I couldn't pump them up more, because I wouldn't be who I am if it not for their education in many ways. Mm-hmm. And yeah, you know, somebody asking me like, how did you find, you know, your self-love and self-confidence through a lot of trial and error and conscious error, like, hey, I'm gonna just do this and take this time to figure out this and put a boundary. And what do I do when somebody crosses my boundary? And
Right.
what does that feel like? And how do I reinforce that? And if I'm stuck in this pattern, I realize this person isn't respecting me.
Yes.
I'm done.
Yes.
Period. We ain't got nothing else to talk about.
Bye.
Bye.
I do think that, and I haven't touched on this a lot. I touch on it more when I'm one-on-one with my clients and teaching them individually.
Mm-hmm.
But I feel like a lot of our development into confidence does end up happening from pain. And that's a really weird thing to say. But I think that when people mistreat you enough, you get to a point where you're like, I'm fucking done with this, right? And when you begin to realize that one of like my core teachings in my confidence teachings is that confidence, self-confidence and self-respect are like, they're like this, like they are two peas.
Totally. I believe that.
So if someone is, if you are lacking that respect, then other people will not respect you. And then you don't have the confidence to say, hey, stop disrespecting me. Right. And it's when you get enough of that pressure that you finally realize that like the only thing that matters is your health and happiness and safety. And even if that boundary is like, I can't let white people into my life if they're not actively showing and representing that they are anti-racist, like that's a big boundary. But it also is what you learn how to create and something that you're confident in upholding when you've had enough white people in your life, like, all right.
Yeah, when you've been hurt enough, like exactly what you said.
Yeah.
Yeah. And when you said that, when you've been hurt enough, it just 10 years ago, I just remember myself being like, I am not happy. Like I am not happy. And then just like making a conscious decision towards happiness. Like, how can I be happy? I signed up for my first yoga teacher training. I'm like, I don't know. I like yoga. This makes me happy. It lets you this. And I just advise anybody who's like seeking out that self-healing to just like go where it feels good. But like, don't trick yourself. Go where it really feels good. Like for me, that was yoga. For me, that was learning how to say no.
Yeah.
In everything, in yoga, work, in relationships, in life. Yeah.
I realized that yoga is one of those practices. I found yoga like 12 years ago. And it's definitely one of those practices. I never went into teaching because I just loved being a student so much. And there's 8 limbs of yoga. So there's so much to learn, so much you can do. But I realized that like every limb of yoga is a practice in reconnecting with your authentic and true self. And in a society that continues to try and rip women away from what they truly are or truly want or how they naturally grow or are as bodies and people, like it's been really nice to have a yogic practice that just every little bit of it is about coming back to yourself and reconnecting back to yourself and your spirit. And it's really beautiful. But you're right. It really does help ignite that confidence in you because you're like, oh, I know myself. And now I can begin acting like myself.
I feel like being a woman is like the like it's like the black equivalent, like in a way, like I don't remember where I was going with that. I was piggybacking off of something that you said, but then I stopped thinking and kept listening, and now erase that comment. It was highly intelligent, I swear, and very hilarious, but who knows where I was going.
So happy that my words could consume you. I try my best.
Well, I was like, let me just pay attention to what she's saying.
Kloii, this has been such an amazing conversation. Thank you so much for hopping on to talk with me about this. I think it's a really important perspective that a lot of people could get something out of in terms of how they can turn their racist experiences into more activism on their end away from us. So I just want to say a big thank you. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I know we're ending up here, but that does beg the question if Black people, and of course this is not all, we're individuals, some people kind of are fueled by teaching white people things. But if in general, I'm generalizing here, if Black people don't want to educate white people and the white supremacist white people are highly educating something else over there, and the sort of white people who don't think they're racist aren't saying anything, and then there's so few allies and white abolitionists who are saying something, then it's just, you know, tipping in terms of like that balance.
Mm-hmm.
You know, are they winning? You know, for lack of a better way to say that, if there's so much less education on the other side, especially in education from Black people and education from public school systems in America in general,
Right.
about it all. So I'm, you know, maybe that's a real question, maybe that's a hypothetical, but yeah, that brings up that thought.
Here's two things that I've been thinking about over this last year. I had a conversation with, I saw a group that was being formed online that was about decentralizing whiteness. And I realized that like the entire group was white people. So I added myself to the group and I said, where are the Black people in this group? And it was like me and one other woman. And they were like, well, you know, we didn't want to ask Black people to join this group because we didn't want to put the burden of education on Black women. And I said, I appreciate that. And I agree that putting the burden of education on Black women is not a thing, but I don't think that you're going to learn what you need to learn in a circle of white women just talking about Black issues amongst white women. Like there needs to be a Black person.
Like, are they bringing in literature, like Black literature, Black articles, like other things? Or are they just talking about how to not center whiteness from their own white perspective?
They're doing all of it, but they are doing all of those things, but I think that it still changes the perspective of the conversation if there are no Black people there, because there's nobody there to, if something isn't correct, there's no one there to be like, like.
I mean, yeah, it has to be the most enlightened white person in the group, and like,
yeah.
I mean, right? No offense, white people, but you know, the whole world wouldn't be like a white supremacist planet if, you know, more of y'all were kind of better. So
and how much can they really know about the Black experience? Like I get it. Like there's education for sure. But if you're just a group of white women in a circle talking about these Black issues, then it's just the same as them like sitting in class or like what, like there's no real perspective that comes out of that. Mm-hmm. And I do think at the end of the day, this all comes down to consent. There are like, I am mixed. I am mixed race. I'm half Black, half white. I have these conversations with Black people and white people all the time. Right. And like, I actually am someone that doesn't mind sitting down and having an educational conversation. Mm-hmm. Obviously, my experience as a half Black, half white person is different than a full Black experience or another mixed race experience. But I'm okay having those conversations. I am not okay when people try and force me into a conversation or try to get me to commiserate with them without asking me if I give a fuck about what they're talking about. You know, like you're coming to me with this story, expecting me to be like, oh, honey, like, so sorry. And at the end, like, at the end of it, I'm like, I'm mad at you. Like, why would you do that to me? Like, I already had 3 racist interactions today. I didn't want to have to coddle you in one more. So it's like asking if it's okay, saying, hey, I had this experience. Do you have the bandwidth, emotional, like time and space to be here with
Sometimes I think it's okay until they say something stupid and I'm like, that was it. We're not talking anymore. Done.
I just realized I'm really tired.
Like, oh yeah.
You're just like, I'm done. Like, I thought I was okay for this conversation, but I can't. You know, gotta wash my hair now. Like I gotta go.
I'm just busy. I can't talk now.
You know what? I forgot. I'm really busy right now. Yeah, it is. And it's, you know, I think that consent, you know, we learned a lot about sexual consent over the last couple of years, but I think that we need to get into racial consent now, and really begin asking if people have the time, have the space, or are okay with the conversation. Hey, I heard this thing. Hey, I read this thing. What do you think about it? Like all of that needs to come with, is it cool? Can we talk about it? Are you cool? And at the same time, at any point in the conversation, Black people should be able to say, I'm burnt. Like this is as far as I can go today, or this is as far as I want to go with this topic of conversation. Like consent can be pulled at any time, and like people need to respect that and stop looking at us like bitches because we aren't willing to meet them when they're ready. And
like even when the tip is in, no, I changed my mind. I don't consent anymore. It's done. I took my consent away.
Get off
I don't
me.
want to have this conversation
Get off
about
of
you
me.
asking how I get my hair that curly. I do
No.
not consent. I do not consent.
Mm-mm.
Does your hair just grow that way? Yes, it does. Like,
I'll have to tell you the story
real
of
questions.
the day a woman asked me how long it took me to curl my hair every morning. And I was like, my curls are tiny. And I'm like, you think I do this every
Like,
morning?
if there was a device in the world that could get those that tiny.
What are you
Yeah.
talking about? But you know, it really just goes back to how, like, I don't want to call it ignorance, but it really is. Like, they
It is
just
ignorance,
don't
which is
know
fine.
anything
Why
because they
people
haven't been
get
taught
so
anything.
offended when they hear, because again, they're not used to hearing anything negative or real truth, because they're so used to hearing all these negative depictions about everything else, but never have to think like, oh, actually, what if it's me? And it's okay to be ignorant, because ignorance is curable with knowledge and knowing some shit. There you go, white people. Google. Like, yeah.
And it's okay to not know everything. What's not okay is to pretend that you do, or to have,
or to gaslight, or to get defensive, or to continue to live in disillusionment.
To tell you shit. Nobody's obligated to teach you anything, right? If you're lucky if you have someone in your life that's willing to, but we're not obligated to just because you're confused. Fine. That's it. Okay. We are rounding into an hour, so I am going to close out our chat.
Yeah,
Kloii.
I mean, we ended and then we restarted.
We started again.
We done now. We done. I just have stuff on my mind.
We are about this. I am so grateful. Thank you so much for coming on and having this chat with me.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Yes. Thank you so much for everyone that joined us on the live. I am going to grab those links to the confidence boosting companies that Kloii mentioned here on the show today. So they will be in the details of this show. I will be back on February 3rd at our normal day and time, Wednesday at 4 p.m. Pacific, 7 p.m. Eastern. I'm going to be meeting with Courtney Fullwood. We are actually going to be talking about something that Courtney is from season 1. And we had a conversation about, positive Black images. We need more positive Black images. And one of Courtney's goals for this year is to learn how to further support Black women in the community, further support Black women in the world, in their endeavors, however it is that they want to show up. So I thought it would be a really good chat to have, to come on and talk about how we as Black women can support Black women. And I'll have a little bit of details in there about how even you can support Black women as well. So thank you again, Kloii, and I'll see all of you on February 3rd.
Bye.